We'd like to introduce you to our panelists right now. Right here is Providence Police Chief Hugh Clements. We have Corey Jones with Black Lives Matter.
We have, of course, Rhode Island Governor Gina Raimondo, and we have Brother Gary Dantzler with Black Lives Matter. We want to thank you all for being here. We also have Secretary of Health and Human Services, Wamazetta Jones, who's in our studio. She will join us a little bit later in the conversation because of social distancing.
Yes.
We have limited our panel size to 4 here in our studio. So, Brother Gary, we're going to start with you. You know, there's a lot of folks that may say we're with Black Lives Matter or we're doing this because of Black Lives Matter, but they don't necessarily represent your organization. So let's set the record straight, who you are and what your mission exactly is.
It's a hard joint effort with the community. We're trying to make change, and we want to have a voice, you know, so we can make it clear that we're here to stay, you know, to change the system, our systemic racism.
I think that what we're doing with Black Lives Matter and starting a political action committee is going to be significant, is going to be huge for people of color in this community, being able to actually have an organization that specifically is going to be grooming people of color to run for office.
Now you have the ears of the governor and the police chief of Providence. Let's start the discussion. What would you like to see from them?
Yeah, so I think that we're taking steps in the right direction with renegotiating the Bill of Rights, but I think that the ultimate goal needs to be abolishing police unions in the state of Rhode Island.
The unions serve a vital function in much that we do. I think there's a lot on the table as far as conversations, and we can't escape some of the real things that have happened across this country and how they've transformed into what we do locally.
What's your reaction when you hear that call to defund the police?
It doesn't make sense to me. In that the better police departments, and we consider ourselves one, it's so important. It is vital to have that type of funding to teach leaders and managers risk management, cultural competency, implicit bias training, de-escalation training. Training is key.
I think that, you know, the sentiment of defunding the police isn't to completely wipe out the budget of the police, but it's, you know, can we increase nonviolent responders? We do need more training, but maybe we need people that are playing a different role. Boston led the way, kind of. You know, they reduced the budget by 20%, and then they spent that 20% in programs to support these nonviolent responses.
And your thoughts on that?
So Corey and I agree on that, in that the Providence Police Department has partnered with many organizations, including the Nonviolence Institute. We have clinicians who stand roll call. They ride in Providence Police units, cars, every single shift. So can we expand on that program for those non-emergency type calls? Absolutely. I think that's smart policing. That's a good approach.
Governor, I know you talked about implicit bias training for state employees. To what degree, to what scope, who's going to fall under that? What's the timeline? How are you going to implement that?
It's going to be all employees in state government at every level, because we all have our own bias and we might not realize it. And there's a lot of good people who think they're not racist. They think they're not biased, but they are, and they need to be aware of that.
What is your training going to look like in the state? How do you train all of these state employees?
I'll probably start with folks in management, myself included, right? You got to set the tone at the top, and then folks will follow.
We want to bring in Secretary Jones.
You are head of diversity now. So what does that mean, and what are you pledging to do?
It means a lot to me, because I am a Black woman first, you know, a mother second, and a professional third. So this and what is happening means a lot to me. Its impact is a lot. I look forward to initiatives as it relates to the state police working on securing the needed studies and funding to have body cams. We know that they matter, they impact.
Absolutely.
But they're only as good as if they're turned on.
Right.
And we've seen them not being turned on.
And that's one of the many pieces, I'm sure, of policy construction. But I encourage our state police, which I'm sure they will, to have all voices at the table as they develop these policies regarding body cams, regarding all pieces and manners of their work.
Even on the body-worn camera policy, which was important. We were the first police department in New England to go department-wide. And it was important to have the right voices, the right people at the table to implement the policy as it best serves our community. We looked at policy across the country, and we developed a real tight, strong policy where officers are held accountable when they don't have them on.
How?
Audit checks, compliance checks, and we're well over 90% on routine checks during the week, during the month, during the course of 3-month periods. So we routinely check by call. By policy, we have certain calls where you have to have the body-worn camera on. When you make an arrest, use of force, there's certain other calls where we advise not to have the body-worn camera on when you're speaking to a sensitive victim. So based on our policy, we do audit compliance checks, and our compliance is very good on those checks, but there have been occasions when they haven't been put on and they're held accountable.
Governor, you're a mother. Obviously, I know you bring a lot of that to the table in the way you've governed. Have you sat down with your own children to talk about the issues of race, racism that is out there?
They're teaching me as much as I'm teaching them. And I think they see that that's a big part of why I do my job. You know, the policing issues are important, but so is free community college. So is fixing, making the Providence Public Schools better, which are, 90% kids of color. So they know what I'm doing, but they're also saying to me, Mom, why aren't you doing more? What's taking you so long? They are impatient teenagers who are privileged white kids, and they know that. But they are saying to me, okay, yeah, Mom, pick up the pace, because we still have problems.
Brother Gary, what do you think of what the governor outlined in her proposals in terms of Rhode Island State Police exploring the use of body cameras, having community outreach with state police?
We've been feeling this for years, generation after generation. So it's something that needs to be addressed immediately. I don't want to go back to the times, from last month or what happened, 2 years ago. I think it's time for us to move forward. Earlier, me and Mr. Jones, we talked about education, right? We want to build the first African-American charter school, an economic base, a hub, a resource center for Black Lives Matter Rhode Island.
So Secretary Jones, let's go off of what Brother Gary said and some of the initiatives that he's talking about and how you see that being implemented in Rhode Island.
With the idea of a school that's centric to African-American children, a charter school, I think that would definitely be a benefit. It's not something that I would see as detrimental. However, I would still encourage that we look at how do we include all children, because the only way we change this world is for all of our kids across all races to understand all history.
Are you hopeful?
Yeah, I am hopeful because, a lot of times in America, we forget that, the Black suffrage is not just us. It's a global suffrage. And when you talk about the global movement, that gives me hope, that we can see change around the entire world for Black people.